Today we have a special guest, and I'm very excited. She has dedicated her career to transforming communication and empowering interpreters. Mireya Perez began as a certified medical interpreter and spent nearly a decade in public schools, where she championed the critical role of interpreters in education. But Mireya's impact goes beyond interpreting. She hosts the popular Brand the Interpreter podcast, sharing inspiring stories and expert insights from language professionals worldwide. With a master's degree in communications, Mireya brings a wealth of knowledge on creativity, branding, and strategic communication. Please join me in welcoming Mireya as she shares her expertise on branding for language professionals.
Thank you so very much for the opportunity to be here. I'm so very happy to be sharing space with everyone. It's such a pleasure. It's amazing to think that I'm joining your class all the way out from Costa Rica. So I really, really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm very happy to be here with everyone. So if it's okay now, I'd like to go ahead and share my screen, if that's possible, to be able to um,
Yes.
share that presentation with you. So give me just a second while I set it all up on my end here.
Mhm. We can see it now.
Fantastic. Then we can get started in that case. So thank you so very much. I appreciate once again the opportunity to be here. I really love talking about this particular topic. I think this is one of my popular themes or topics to present about. And it's just always such a great pleasure to be able to speak to other language professionals, even the new generation of language professionals anywhere really in the world that are interested in knowing how to expand on the topic of branding. As I mentioned, or rather, as was mentioned, I do host a podcast that is entitled Brand the Interpreter. And the whole idea behind that was basically to be able to brand the role of the interpreter and be able to sort of expose the general public to the lives of language professionals, regardless of where they were placed in the map. I began my career as what we know here in the States, it's known as a community interpreter. European countries know it as public service interpreters. But I started in the medical field, so very specifically serving the medical health community. And then I did make my way into education. And I feel like that's where the background for branding the role really was inspired, because much to my surprise, even though schools teach languages, they had very little knowledge about professionalizing the role, or rather what language can do for one as a professional. And I think there was a lot of minimal information regarding the profession. So what could you do with a language degree? Teach. And that's probably as far as the imagination took them. So for whatever crazy reason, I decided that I would take it upon myself to help brand the role there in the district so that others could identify trained interpreters and equate them to professionals. And that's what I really dedicated nearly a decade in that school district. Now, I carry on that same role. I just do it in a completely different way. I go out into the field and I have conversations about branding the role for individuals that are just starting the profession, even for individuals that have been in the profession for a while and are looking to do a little bit of a change. So what I'm hoping that some of our topics, with the time that you're allowing me and sharing with me today, is that we can talk a little bit about what is brand identity. And as you begin to embark on your professional career, thinking about some of these things to help boost your professional career. Some of you may already know much about this just thanks to social media and the power that social media has. But I think really getting to know it in depth and almost having this need to want to learn more about it, I think really is what inspires one's work to really expand on this particular topic. So I'm hoping to be able to help you understand what a brand identity is, help you understand how sharing your story or making some noise about what you do or what you offer, how that can help your professional career. And of course, I'll always bring in the element of what building a community can do for you. So along the way, if you do have questions or if there's something that you'd like to maybe share in terms of experience, it'd be great. It's a small enough group, I think, that we can along the way, so feel free to chime in. But otherwise, you can do the questions in the Q&A if you'd like. But let me begin by asking you, in your own words, when you think of the word brand, what do you think about? What comes to mind when you think about the word brand? You could either add it in the chat or you can open mic. Feel free to share. What do you think about when you think about the word brand?
Like an image.
Who was that?
Like an image.
Image. So when you think about the word brand, an image comes to mind, right? What else? What else could we potentially think about when we think about the word brand? Yes, Allison.
Personally, when I think about brand, I think about uniqueness, and I think that's very related with the identity fact. So yeah, when I think about brand, I think about uniqueness a bit. I think about being different from other brands and being like the light spot, like the protagonist in something.
I like that. Yes, uniqueness and the protagonist potentially, right? Jose Pablo?
Hello, good evening. Well, I believe it's something that identifies something or someone. It could be an image or something in specific. And as it was mentioned before, I believe also that it identifies something or again someone and relates that person to something in specific.
Fantastic. So I'm hearing image, I'm hearing almost relating information to something or someone. So it helps you sort of identify potentially the something or the someone when you think about brand or uniqueness, right? As Allison had mentioned. And all of those things is definitely something that when we think about what a brand is, we're making these connections. It's just thinking about the word brand. Now, according to Bolt Group, which potentially you may identify some of your own definitions when you think about the word embedded in their definition. They say that it's the sum total of all visual and non-visual. So for those of you that spoke about image, you see the word visual here. Verbal and non-verbal, tangible and intangible elements that help to identify, form, create, and influence, there's your word unique, and positive associations for a product, a service, or an entity that differentiates it from its competition, creating meaning, value, and preference in one's mind. Now, we're going to get back to a lot of those things in just a little bit. But before we continue, what does this image represent to you?
Shopping.
Shopping. What else? What is the first thing that comes to mind when you see this image? And by the way, some of these images might be very US based, so if nothing comes to mind, also let me know. Have you seen this image before?
Yes.
Amazon.
Very good. Amazon, Monica said. Fantastic, thank you. What else? What does that word or this image associated with? So for somebody, this image immediately a name came to mind. What else?
Delivery.
Delivery, right? Fast, potentially. Something that comes to my home and I don't even have to get out of my pajamas. It'll come specifically to me, directly to my house. What else? What else do we think about when we see this image?
Talking with my personal experience, because I worked there many years ago, but usually that brand focuses on customer service.
Customer service. Wow, that's a good one. I'm going to keep that one, Jose Paulo, for the next time I teach this this particular topic. Yeah, so customer service potentially. Actually, we don't even have to work there to potentially identify the customer service element for this company, because if you've ever had to return anything or do anything with the customer service side, you very likely have had some experience. So very well, we can identify that based off of one image. We're associating names, potential experiences, right? Even personal experiences. Do you recognize this image? What does this
Yes.
image mean?
Just do it.
Ooh, slogan immediately. Just do it. What else?
Sports.
Sports.
Shoes.
Shoes. Sneakers. I take it that you're more familiar, or maybe have had more experience with this particular brand maybe than with Amazon. What else? What else do we think about when we think about this particular image? What comes to mind when you see it?
Athletes.
Athletes. So sports, athletes, tennis shoes. What about this one?
Ooh, yummy. Coffee.
Yummy.
Coffee, yeah.
Coffee. I don't know if that's what Sebastian is drinking, but coffee. Yeah. What else? What else do we think about when we see this image?
Tumblr.
What is it?
Tumblr. It was an old social media where this brand in specific was very famous at 2018, 2016.
Oh, interesting. You're gonna have to write that in the chat for me so that I can bring that up next time as well when I teach this. So absolutely, all of these things, of course, when we're bringing these things up, it brings up, it stirs up some knowledge potentially behind this particular brand. Now, what it stirs up is it's very unique to the individual. It's very unique to the experience of the individual. Maybe for some of you, you've seen it, you recognize it, but it may not necessarily mean anything to you or have any sort of significance. However, here's what we don't see. What we don't see with these images that were just demonstrated are anything that tells you what the image is associated with. So for example, for the Amazon image, we didn't see anything that said, we sell things online. This was something that just potentially you thought about when you saw this particular image. For this particular image here, we all know is associated with Starbucks, right? And Starbucks, I've heard many different things when I teach this particular course, which is Starbucks is expensive coffee, right? Or some people don't even like Starbucks. So some people will say, disgusting coffee or bad coffee or whatever. I don't know how, but some people definitely don't like it. What we don't see is it saying anything about we sell coffee. The image speaks for itself. And the same goes for the Nike logo. We don't see anything that says we sell shoes. In fact, your professor said it very specifically, immediately, the correct slogan to that is just do it. So all of these logos, these images that you see represent a product, a service, even a company. And it has a very significant, almost unique code, for instance, in everyone's mind. You think about this image and you immediately attach it to a very specific meaning, maybe out of experience, maybe out of what you've heard, but it's almost an immediate knowledge or understanding. Branding for us in this particular presentation, what I'd like for us to take away is the process of creating a unique name, an image, establishing a significant and significant and differentiated presence. So for us, branding is going to be a process. And it's important that we understand that branding is a process because it evolves. Unless you feel like you're going to be stagnant between now and 10 years from now, potentially, and you're not going to evolve as an individual, as a profession, then in that case, then maybe you won't be branding, you'll just brand and stay there for the remainder of your professional life. But I highly doubt that. All of you look very, very young, and I think you'll definitely continue to evolve as individuals and will continue to evolve as professionals. So for our sake, for our understanding, it's important that we understand that branding is a process. It's something that we develop, that we potentially outgrow at some point, and that we continue to improve or expand on as we continue to add more elements into our specific profession. One of my ultimate favorite stories growing up was the story of Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland, if you're not familiar with this one, I don't know, maybe you're not, is the story of a little girl that goes down a rabbit hole. And I mean, now that I'm older, there's so many other significance to this particular story. But as a girl, I remember just thinking how interesting the story was, that she gets lost, and along the way, she finds different unique characters that ultimately, in their own unique way, help guide her back home. But she encounters these unique characters, and one of these characters, this is one of my favorite scenes, is the caterpillar. And when she encounters the caterpillar, he asks her a very specific question, very easy, simple question. He asks her, "Who are you?" Right? Now, has anybody seen the movie by any chance of Alice in Wonderland? Have you seen it in English or in Spanish?
In English.
In English. So you know this particular moment, right? Where it asks her, "Who are you?" And Alice has such a difficult time answering this question. She's like, "Well, I don't know. I'm not the same person from when I woke up. When I woke up, I was this person, and I thought I was that." And she stumbles. He's absolutely not interested in hearing all the babble. All he wants to know is her answer to, "Who are you?" He's really trying to get down to that question. And today I want to be that caterpillar and asking you that very same question. Who are you? What makes you you? And by you, I mean the professional you, the you that is about to embark on that professional setting. What are you looking into the future you? What does that look like? Who are you, so that you're able to continue evolving as you begin to develop your professional skill sets and your techniques in this particular industry? Because as this little quote says, if you can't answer that question, how will you ever become a butterfly, right? That's not necessarily what they say in that story, but in essence, that's really what he's leading to. So here's what I'd like for you to do. Let's begin by identifying who we are. And granted that I realize that for perhaps many of you, or maybe all of you, I'm not sure, you might not have yet an established presence online, what we call the digital footprint, right? Not in the professional setting, or maybe you have. But how about we test it out? If you have your phone on you, do me a favor and search your name and see what shows up, and then share with me what results you get.
I'm done.
What results did you get?
First, I get four pictures. My TED Talk, the TED Talk website, then the YouTube TED Talk video, and then 2 LinkedIn links. And then the first link is my LinkedIn.
First link is LinkedIn.
Yes.
Fantastic. Very well, very well. What else? Who else do we get? What did we find?
For me as well, I search and the first link is my LinkedIn profile. And the second one is for a same Monica, same last name, everything, but she's a teacher and a university. I know her.
And she's somebody
But
I don't know, right? Somebody else. Very good. Excellent. Yes, that's a great point that I'm going to get to in just a little bit. Who else? Who else would like to share what they got in their results? Well, I mean, there has to be some results if you searched. Jose Pablo?
Yes, well, I have three results. Well, my Instagram profile and two LinkedIn links. One for my, let's say, personal account, and another one for my uh, freelance translator website. Well, yeah, website. Let's say that I have. So that's it. I have a picture
It's
of
yours,
myself.
but it's yours.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And your personal comes out, you say?
Yes, my personal one, and the other one, let's say the professional.
Fantastic. Okay. Anyone else? What results? Sophia, what results did you get?
I actually didn't saw any results of anything personal of mine. Only saw like a website that can tell me that that tells me that I can vote.
Very well. Okay. So nothing personal of yours though necessarily,
No.
right? Okay, that could be a good thing and a bad thing, right? But we'll talk a little bit more about that. Anybody else would like to share? What were the results? Thank you, Sophia. Johan,
Hello.
what were your results?
For me, as same as Sophia, it's just some profiles, but that is not me.
Some profiles that is not you. Very
Yep.
well. Okay. So let's remember that. Let's keep that in mind in terms of what those results were. Now, if I take it a little deeper, let's say like get a little bit more specific and say, I want to put my name and then I want to put comma and I want to put now the specialty field that you're interested in. If it's interpreter or translator, go ahead and put your name, comma, interpreter or translator, whichever one you want to be associated with, and see if anything shows up. For those of you that have LinkedIn accounts, it's very likely that that's exactly what's going to show up. But see if it narrows it down. Maybe the teacher will be eliminated, Monica. Let's see. If anything different shows up this time, raise your hand and let me know what showed up this time.
One question, just the name or also the last name?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, so your full name. You can say
Okay.
Johan Alonso. If you use your full name all the time, then just use your full name and then comma interpreter or translator. And then Maria Jose, I think, wants to share. What came up now?
Almost the same, like LinkedIn, the TikTok, but now I have my fourth result is my website.
Ah, now my fourth result is my website. Notice that the first time she searched just her name, the website didn't come up. But the moment you added another unique element that's very particular to you, something else showed up. What about Allison?
It's weird. I add interpreter, and now a photo of myself appeared on Google Images. I don't know why, because I don't have that word in anything in any of my profiles, but it appeared a photo of me, and it's recent. It is a professional picture that somebody on my work took of me, and also it appeared my Facebook profile, which I never use my Facebook profile, my LinkedIn, and also another LinkedIn link, but this one was like, look for Céspedes Arias and 100 more.
out of all yeah, all these other individuals with the same name. But see how interesting it is. Your digital footprint, by the way, this is how, especially with technology and AI now, and the way it's taking shape, you know, that you've got the image identifiers, right? Those that Google or whatever it may be, these search engines are already making that connection on their own. Now, why, with the addition of interpreters, something somewhere along the way, the digital footprint is out there and we don't even know about. And then we've got dormant accounts. So that's important. Let's think about that as well as we can continue this conversation. So just notice how the more we filter with very specific words that we want connected potentially to our name, the more it narrows down the options, the more specific it gets. And if you start to add your languages, for instance, you start to say, you know, if your language combination is going to be English or Spanish, right? English and Spanish, excuse me. If you start adding language combinations, it'll start to narrow these down even further. So the more you look at your name with very specific identifiers, with very specific language, the more we can see ourselves, even potentially the things we don't want to see, as Allison just shared. What is that? Old Facebook came up. I don't even use Facebook anymore. But sometimes even the things that we don't necessarily want to pop up will pop up, depending on our digital footprint, which is a different course altogether. So for today, I want us to really embrace the fact that what we're trying to develop here, we understand what a brand is, we understand what branding is. Now let's put it all together to what we're trying to do for ourselves as individual professionals. A personal brand, according to Jeff Bezos, remember that image in the beginning? So Jeff Bezos is connected to Amazon, of course, says that your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. Now think about that. What other people say about you when you're not in the room. So those images that you saw earlier and those associations that you immediately made, for some people, the associations were with experiences, and experiences with that unique brand, that company, that particular service. For many people, it's an experience. For other individuals, it's just an association of a product or a service. For us, we want all of that as professionals. We want someone to think about very specific things when someone thinks about Allison Daniela, the interpreter or the translator, whichever, or both, whichever it may be. What specific things, when someone brings up your name, do we want them to think about? Okay, this is important as we begin to embark on this journey, professional journey, and begin to really expand on this conversation of personal branding. Do you want to be known as the Spanish interpreter? Or do you want to be known as the interpreter that you fill in the blank? The professional interpreter. The interpreter that specializes in environmental disasters, the interpreter that specializes in, you know, she's the English to Spanish interpreter, but she's an amazing medical interpreter that specializes in neurology. You see, those very key specific words are associated with your name if you develop your brand that way. And it's going to be very important that we think about these things as we start to consider, who am I? Or as we begin to consider, who are you as Alice in Wonderland? So just like Alice in Wonderland had this conundrum, you know, of being able to answer the question, who am I? It's really important that as we begin to think about our personal brand and how we're going to begin the personal brand journey and then expand on that, that we do a little bit of a self-reflection. It's important that we think about what those particular strengths are, those skills, those values that you bring to the table. And potentially we might hear about this and say, yeah, I'm really good at, you know, I don't know, I'm really good at organization, or I'm really good at, you think about these very surface level, potentially when you respond to this particular question of what are your strengths, what are your skills, what are your values. But I'd like for you to really think about when we're talking about building our personal brand, and potentially this is how I started, by the way, when I was really trying to figure out, like, how do I want to be known in the industry? What are those things that are important to me? What are those things that have purpose? What is my purpose? What are the goals that I have? And I started to write these things down. I'm one of those like people that like to collect notebooks. I don't know why. Like I like going and buying notebooks, and I don't necessarily journal, dear diary. I don't necessarily do that, but I do like to jot down a lot of my ideas in a journal. I like to write things out and really try to develop some of these ideas, especially as things start to come to mind. I like to put them down on paper. So what we want to do is do the same thing. We want to try to identify what those strengths are. What are those skills that I bring to the table? What are those things that people always tell you, Daniela, you're really good at, whatever that fill in the blank is. Or, Sebastian, I really appreciate when you help me with, because like I would never be able to do that. All those things that we sometimes feel like, oh, it's really not, it's no big deal, right? It's easy. It's easy for you because you're good at it, because it's your skill set, because it's your strength. And sometimes people tell us what we're good at, and we let that slide because we feel it's not a big deal. But those are the types of things we want to really keep in mind. What are those things that people are telling you that you're really good at? So think about that as we begin to develop this process of your personal brand. When you're thinking about your strengths, your skills, and your values, it's important that you try to break down your experiences. One of my favorite things about speaking with professionals from around the world on the podcast is that we really get to talk about their past experiences. And let me tell you that it is amazing how some of us that have been in the field for many, many years, I'll just say it like that we're able to make the connection of our past experiences with our present day profession. Meaning to say that it's not something that you did in the past and you leave in the past and you'll never touch on those experiences from the past, and that somehow help evolve in the future. It's ridiculous sometimes, some of these things, right? I remember, for instance, when I was younger, I used to work in an office. It was like in my 20s, right? And it was like, I like color coding everything. Everything was like a color code. Like for me, it was almost like mental mapping things. And it's funny because now you look at my presentations and there's a lot of color to it because I identify it as, okay, this is the topic that I want to talk about for this section, and this is the topic that I want to talk about for that section. You bring this to the table just because you remember that these are past experiences and potentially even strengths that you may not even think about or relate to, but individuals bring that. They mention that about you. You want to make sure that you break down these experiences. What were things that you did in the past that you really enjoyed? What were things that you maybe experienced in the past at some point in your maybe not that distant past as a student, or maybe as a volunteer? Maybe it could be an area, not necessarily something you did, but an area in which you volunteered or you worked that you really enjoyed or you really liked. Make sure that you're defining your purposes and your goals. This is important. It's important because if you are defining your values, your goals, your objectives, what you want to be known for, all of those things, they're going to help you in really knowing how you're going to carry yourself as a professional. I know what my values are. My values as an individual sort of, they overlap with my values of a professional. I know that I want to do business with companies, and which is exactly what I do. I embark on business ventures with companies that are ethical, that are trustworthy, that are honest, that are professional, that understand and value the profession. Those are the companies I want to work for. That's what they get out of me. And that's exactly what I expect back from these individuals. And that's the only people that I want to do business with. But that was clear for me from the beginning because I made that clarity. So again, I encourage you, actually do some self-reflection and start jotting down some of these things that you feel are valuable to you. Because if one day somebody comes and asks you, who are you? What is important? What do you do? These things are going to come to you simply because you've already put some thought into it. And you're not like, I'm a Spanish interpreter. So are 100,000 others, right? In this states and abroad. What makes you different? What makes you unique? And only if you put some thought into it are you really going to be able to answer that question. After you think about all of these things, Maria Jose mentioned earlier, I am a major in communications. And one of the things that I know for a fact, because I implemented it in and continue to implement it in various aspects of my career, is this notion of what I call creating a campaign. So when you think about these brands, do you think that these brands simply popped up an image and people automatically associated that image with whatever their service or their product is? No, right? I should see some shaking of heads. It doesn't come automatically. It's the same thing for you when you think about how are people going to know my name out there? Are they just going to know it because I get a degree and now I can consider myself a professional interpreter or a professional translator and people are simply going to know my name? That's not what happens with brand strategies. Brand positioning, that's why there's so many individuals that are behind the work of positioning a product so that they can put it in front of faces, in front of people, so that they can identify and get familiar with the product or the service. So we want to think about the same thing when we think about ourselves. Once we've identified really what we want to be known for, how we want to approach our work, who we want to work with, once we're clear on those things, then we can start thinking about, well, how am I supposed to push out this information? Don't worry, you don't have to hire a PR expert to do that for yourself. I mean, look at all the influencers out there. For all I know, you might be one of them, actually, now that I think about it. I don't know, you might be famous on TikTok, but you don't need a PR manager unless you start making a lot of money. Then maybe. But just to start, all you need is simply some knowledge. Some of you already even have it started. You mentioned LinkedIn. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But you want to create a campaign. Where do you want to show up? And when I ask, where do you want to show up? I really want you to think about, where are your potential clients showing up? Because if your clients are not on Facebook and you're very involved on Facebook, and you're trying to start up your business on Facebook, but that's not where the people that you want to work with, that's not what they're showing up, then it's a waste of time for you professionally to show up on Facebook if that's not where they're at. If your clientele or the people you want to work with are on TikTok, then now you're creating a strategy, right? This is the strategic part to the strategy, is really being able to find out, well, where are these people showing up because I want to show up? So the very first thing that we want to make sure that we're clear on is what I call a personal commercial. Now, you might know it as, or maybe have heard it as, the elevator speech. Does anybody know what an elevator speech is?
Yes.
Maria Jose, please, while I drink some water.
I have also heard as the elevator pitch. I don't know if it was 11 minutes or maybe less than that, where you explain your brand, your company, your services, maybe to either a group of investors or anyone. You can think about anyone, but you need to let them know right away who are you or what your brand is about in just a few minutes. So you don't have time to like tell them a very long story or maybe do like Alice in Wonderland, right? That she didn't know how to answer that. You have to, yeah.
Yeah, and that's great, Maria Jose. Actually, it's actually, believe it or not, it's a lot shorter than that. So the idea of the elevator pitch, you're correct on that, is that you're able to basically say it in the ride of an elevator between floors.
Yes.
So if you're going from floor 1 to floor 2, you're able to give your pitch to the individual that asks, Johan, what do you do? What is it that you do? Right? If that question comes up, that is the caterpillar asking Johan, who are you? Right? That is that caterpillar showing up, and Johan's got seconds to really push out that elevator pitch. So when you're thinking about these things, the values, your uniqueness, the things that you are really good at, how you want to be known, this is where you bring it into your, what I call personal commercial. You're going to ask yourself these questions. When people think about you, what do you want them to recognize you as? You ask yourself, I'm recognized for, like in the present tense. So Johan's going to say, I'm recognized for, throw in a word. Johan, what do you want to be recognized for? Don't think about it too hard. Just, what do you want to be recognized for?
As an English interpreter.
An English interpreter, right? That's what I want to be recognized for. What about Sophia? Sophia, what do you want to be known as?
I would like to be known as a great public communicator.
I want to be known as a great public communicator. Who else? Jose Pablo, what do you want to be known as?
Well, as a great translator.
As a great translator. So when somebody thinks of my name, I want them to immediately associate it with a great translator. What about Monica? If somebody thinks about Monica Maria Barca Castillo, what are they going to think about?
A great teacher.
A great teacher. Excellent. What about Allison? If somebody thinks about Allison Daniela Cespedes Arias, what are they going to think about?
Thinking about me like in the future, I would like to be recognized as a business polyglot, cool teacher.
As a business polyglot, cool teacher. Excellent adjectives. Great job. And I don't think I've heard from Michelle. Did I say that right?
As Monica said, as a good teacher.
As a good teacher, very well. Okay, so then we want to make sure that we're clarifying that when we're trying to write down what do I want to be recognized for. These things are important when you're thinking about creating a personal brand. What do I want to be known for? How do I want others to describe me? Write those things down, because those things are the things that are they're going to guide you in the work that you do. Once you're clear on what you want people to remember you as, or what you want people to know you as, then you can start thinking about, how do I start creating content? So remember that expertise stuff? Remember that stuff, those experiences from the past that you can bring up? I started in the industry by simply sharing my experiences, my unique experiences, as an interpreter that specialized in a field that wasn't yet standardized or professionalized. And I started sharing experiences that I was having as a trained interpreter and the challenges that I was having in this particular field. And that somehow eventually grew some traction. Now, call it luck because of COVID and people were bored probably and came upon or stumbled upon my content. But for some reason, this particular niche was part of a community that also felt the same way. So those unique experiences that you have are important. You want to think about creating content. And when you think about creating content and putting things together, you're able to bring that expertise forward. And you can do it in a variety of different ways. So remember those key terms that you looked for when you did your little search with your name? Those are the key terms we want to be able to use as we create content. And you're able to put your name with those key terms in things such as podcasts. So for instance, you go and you ask if you could be a guest on someone's podcast. It doesn't matter whose podcast. The content is free content that is out. That digital footprint with your name, your titles, those, great teacher, great polyglot teacher, All of those things that you begin to identify yourself with and begin associating it with your name begin to show up. You begin to create what's called this digital footprint. You can do blog posts. If you're someone that really likes to write, you can create blog posts with all of those different key terms that we want to make sure that show up when somebody is searching our name. You can write articles. We'll talk about that in just a little bit when we talk about social media. You can even do speaking engagements. And let me tell you that speaking engagements do not have to be big. They don't have to be a TED Talk environment, Maria Jose, but although if you can get there, please, by all means, because you can see what happens when you search. All of these things show up. But when you show up to do workshops or talks, it could be in your local area. It could be to a middle school, a high school, about the topic of language professionals. And they sometimes will share that information online, and your name shows up whenever somebody searches for that, okay? So think about that as you're thinking about, how do I create content, online content, that is going to bring that back to my name? Speaking about content, it's important that as you begin your journey on creating a personal brand, that you think about a potential social media overhaul. So one of their classmates mentioned that their personal Instagram showed up. Now, if that's something you want the general public to see when they're looking for you, the professional, then by all means, that's totally okay. We want that, right? Perhaps the more the better. But what if I don't want them seeing me sipping on a margarita at some beach in Costa Rica, right? I don't want that to be the first picture that comes up when they look for me. Then maybe potentially we might want to consider a social media overhaul. And by social media overhaul, I mean that we really want to start something new or start something fresh. So do we need to remove that Facebook account? Do we need to figure out, how do I close that out so that eventually that doesn't show up? And by the way, studies have shown that individuals that do searches online for, if they're trying to look for a restaurant, or they're trying to get, see any reviews on potentially a service or a product, they don't tend to necessarily go past the third page. So they'll search for the results from page 1, 2, 3, on whatever those search results are. And they basically create a story based off of those results. They might go page 1, 2, 3, and then go into images and see what they find in the images side. And then they develop their own story based on whatever those results are. So for, I believe it was Allison, if those Facebook results start to get overlapped by your new content that you're pushing out, eventually that result will get pushed back far enough. Then unless you have a stalker or somebody that is really wanting to see, I want to find out if Allison ever had a Facebook, will really dig deep. But otherwise, it will end up in those pages that individuals may not necessarily go back to. This is what's important about creating content that is consistent and creating content on social media, so that it ends up burying the stuff you don't necessarily want in the first few pages. So think about potentially a social media overhaul, or if it's not an overhaul, creating a new one. For instance, many of your colleagues here have mentioned LinkedIn as a result. How many of you, by show of hands, have a LinkedIn account and have it active? You didn't just create it one day and then just left it there dead because it was a bunch of old people on there, aside from Facebook. So you do have LinkedIn accounts, excellent, and they're active. You're active in there, creating content and pushing things out, excellent. So for those of you that don't have a LinkedIn account, LinkedIn, just like YouTube, works as a search engine. So that is the very reason why those are things that are populated. So your professor's, the YouTube video of her TED Talk shows up, right? Because it's like a social, it's like a search engine, as well as LinkedIn. It shows up as a search engine. LinkedIn is really great, actually, for networking and being able to make connections with other language professionals. So if you haven't considered LinkedIn, consider it. And when you consider it and treat it as a professional social media platform. And you may want to begin your overhaul of your social media on LinkedIn if you don't have it. And for those of you that do have LinkedIn, you may want to potentially create content, more content on LinkedIn, so that individuals could begin associating you with those very specific experiences that you want to be associated with. But LinkedIn isn't the only social media platform, of course, as we know, right? There are many individuals that have actually created their professional name on TikTok. And while I don't have it listed here, it is definitely another potential as any other one. It just really depends on which social media you're really comfortable with. So I would say if you're going to do, my suggestion to you is if you're going to start social media that is very specific to the professional setting, pick one or two, get really good at that. Add content consistently, add content that is relevant to the profession or the work that you do. Just write out things that inspire you, share things that you feel are important about whatever experiences you're going through, and you'll begin to see some traction the more that you're able to share out some of this content. Sometimes all you need to do is share out information for the people that potentially you'll do business with. And one day your feed or your post will show up in their feed, right? Because that algorithm makes that connection based on hashtags, based on keywords. It makes that connection, it shows up on their feed, and guess what? Next thing you know, they're in your inbox, wanting to give you some business, wanting to work with you. You'd be surprised how many times that actually happens. So think about that as you're thinking about a social media overhaul. And then, like I mentioned, when you think about your strategies, be strategic about it. You have to take action. So thinking about these things, writing them in a notebook, dreaming about how it potentially could be if you're trying to create a brand is not going to be enough. It's the start, but it's not enough. You do actually have to take some actual action. You can do this by being a strategic volunteer, meaning that you're very specific in the area that I want to specialize in. Is there a need for volunteers? And if so, could I go and volunteer? Could you show up at conferences in the profession and what you're trying to expand? Could you potentially sponsor some events if that's something that is of interest to you? Could you offer workshops, send email campaigns? All of these things are different branding strategies. It's not to say that you need to do all of them in order to have a successful personal brand. It just means that you need to choose a particular strategy that's going to work for you, and then just be consistent about it. Okay? So another specific thing that I mentioned earlier was this notion of understanding your audience. It's really important that we understand, who is that audience going to be? Who do I want to see my content? Is it going to be other language professionals? Is it going to be maybe potential students that I want in the future to be my students, right? What is that potential audience going to look like, and where are they showing up? What are those channels of communication that they're showing up in? Making sure that we develop our unique value proposition. Has anybody heard of a UVP? That unique value proposition? What do you bring to the table that you're unique? That is unique to you, I should say, right? So making sure that you're thinking about, well, how am I going to differentiate myself? Remember that personal commercial, that elevator pitch? It's at least 10 seconds. At least 10 seconds. Now, 10 seconds might not seem like a very long time, but when you know exactly how to answer that question, that who are you question, 10 seconds is enough time for you to be able to say exactly what you want to say and leave a lasting impression. Now, there's more to it in the elevator pitch than just the, my name is Mireya and I'm a professional Spanish to English interpreter and I specialize in education. They're like, okay, that's cool, right? And then they walk away. The idea with what you say is that you're able to hook them. And by hook, that means that they're going to turn around and say, well, tell me more about that, Allison. I've never heard about that. That you've hooked them there and you're able to expand on that conversation. So making sure that when we know who our audience is, that we're developing, creating this content, sharing out that content with that specific audience. And then there is an element of measuring or assessing. Sometimes we push out so much content on one platform that we realize after a while it's not working. We don't have the engagement that we'd like. Now, it could be that it just needs more time. It could be that maybe it needs a little bit more content. Maybe you need to be a little bit more active, or it could simply mean, and you can only determine this if you assess it, that maybe you need to try a different outlet. So measuring and assessing, maybe after 6 months or after a year, of what's working and what's not working for you. The very last thing that is an important element to our branding is that we find a tribe. Many language professionals end up working in silo after a while. Translators do it all the time, especially if you're working from home. You become like this caveman, right? You never leave your house. You never leave the computer. But we want to make sure that we don't do that as professionals. We want to make sure that we are finding who our people are, who our tribe is, making sure that we're working on collaboration projects that are going to support us potentially in the future, or joining a professional network. There's a lot of professional networks out there that would love individuals such as yourself to be a part of them, so that they continue to grow, obviously, with their network, but so do you when you're able to be a part of a professional network. So consider finding the individuals that share sometimes your same experiences, or share maybe your passions, but it doesn't necessarily have to be related to what you specialize in. It could be people from other fields. They might sometimes help you even develop some of these ideas that you have. There's a power in numbers. So you want to make sure that you're looking for individuals that are either, they could be study buddies, they could have the same area of interest, they can be part of an association that you're a part of, maybe even just on social media. You'd be surprised how many individuals I think I've met more people on social media. I know more people on social media than I know more people in real life. That's not an exaggeration at all. I happen to know, not because, oh, I've got, however many people on social media, meaning people that I actually connect with and have conversations with. And, I've done business with people I've never met in person. So that particular audience is actually, it exists. And being on social media, it does have absolutely its benefits. There's always doom scrolling, but that's a whole other conversation. One of my biggest, or rather my favorite quotes comes from this gentleman, George Bernard Shaw. He says that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And it's just something that I carry with me all the time, because many of us think, hey, just because I'm done with my degree, or just because now I have this certificate of completion, or just because I consider myself now a professional, everyone is going to know that. And the truth is that even if we're consistent with the stuff that we're doing, sometimes even that consistency is not enough. And we have to continue working and expanding and growing on our personal brand, because it'll just sit there otherwise, or it won't grow, or it won't expand. So don't think that just because you've received a degree, or maybe you're on social media, that's all it takes for your brand to grow. It's going to take a lot of finessing, but at the end of the day, just by being authentic, by finding your voice and sharing your story, is enough for you to be able to grow as a professional, and grow to the point where as soon as people hear your name, they're going to identify it with something very specific. And that moment when somebody asks you, who are you? Or potentially it might be, what do you do? You'll have that 10-second personal commercial that you'll be able to share, and people will want to be curious and will want to know more about what you do. So that is basically the topic of personal branding for language professionals. I mean, there's a lot more, but in an hour, that's about all we can cover. About all we can cover. So I'm hoping that it give you enough to maybe think about what you'd like to do, as you embark on this journey, and maybe even just expand on that. There's so much that you can do, but at least think about the basics. Any
I
questions?
believe this was more than the basics. This was amazing. I think maybe we can, instead of using, oh, wait, I think there's a question in the Q&A. Jose Pablo says, what other platforms or websites would you recommend that can be helpful to start as a service language provider?
That's such a great question. Thanks for whoever asked that. I'm always going to, my vote is always going to be with LinkedIn. I feel that as a personal experience, and just, I've interviewed over 100 guest language professionals to date, and the majority of them have always talked about their network growing on LinkedIn. In that professional setting, I'm always going to say, even if you're not posting in the beginning, just finding the people, maybe mentors, right? Those individuals that you see that you're like, oh, I like their content, and just being able to follow them and read their stuff. After a while, something that you read is going to inspire a thought in you, and then you begin to post based off of that thought, and then people are going to start coming to you for that specific information that you're sharing or asking questions. So my vote's always going to be, as a professional, for LinkedIn.
Thank you. I think if anyone else has a question, you can also open your mic and ask away.
Yeah.
Do you have any don'ts when you are promoting your brand?
Oh, yes, that's a great question, Sophia. I think it just goes back, when you're doing your brand, especially nowadays. Maybe back in the days it was more of a personal level, which still exists, by the way, but we just have many more opportunities online. So I think it's just going to be the same. It's the digital citizenship rule, right? That you're always showing up in a way in which is not going to come back at you as a professional, that you're showing up online respectfully, that you're sharing, you're absolutely being unique, but without crushing somebody else. Because that's just not, unless that is the type of reputation you want, then obviously that would be a strategy for you. But if it's not, then I would just say, first and foremost, just showing up respectfully online with other individuals. You're absolutely able to disagree with people when they say something that maybe you don't believe that to be true, and being able to share what your take is, but just doing it in the way in which you know that you're representing your professional self, not your personal self. If your personal self wants to go at it with somebody, well, then that's on the personal side. But don't mix the two, basically. And then I think the other one would be, don't want to do too much too soon, because then you burn yourself out in trying to, well, maybe I should try TikTok, and I'm going to do a bunch of videos, and I'm going to do maybe some dancing strategies, but then I'm also going to show up here, and I want to do reels, and being able to do too much at the same time, you may lose the focus on one or the other. Maybe you're really good at it and you can, but I would say stick to one and then expand. Once you have your following, and once you're sure about this particular platform, maybe expand to something else.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great question.
Maybe while they think of other questions, I can ask you one, which is not about branding, but it's more if you can tell us about your process. What do you do before a presentation? How do you prepare? And if you ever feel nervous, how do you work with those nerves? Because I ask this because this is an oral expression class, and then Jose Pablo is also from my interpretation class. And something that we talk about a lot is about being nervous before an oral presentation or before the interpretation test. And I always tell them like, no, don't be nervous. It's just me. But how can we overcome or work with those with the nerves that we
With
feel?
the nerves. Okay. I only laugh because you would be okay. So at least almost 3 years ago, during one of my very first requests to present, I almost passed out. Like, true story. I almost hyperventilated and passed out because I got to see, which I shouldn't have, because I knew that those were things that were going to make me nervous. But for some reason, I got curious, and as they say, curiosity killed the cat. I went and looked to see the list of presenters that were going to be as part of this conference. And immediately I felt sick to my stomach because I was like, I don't belong here. These are professionals that have been in the field for years, and these are people that have PhDs. These are people that have been known in the industry, and on and on and on and on goes the imposter syndrome, right? Like, you don't belong. And I got myself so worked up that as I started to speak, como que me mareé. Like, I felt like I was going to black out. Anyway, I got through it. I don't know how I got through it. Poor audience. They probably were like, is she okay? I got through it somehow, but this is what I learned after that. Number one, I challenged myself. I challenged myself that I didn't ever want to be put in a position like that again, not for myself, but because I felt that was so unfair for the audience to be worried about their presenter, like, is she gonna make it? I felt like when you show up to something and somebody is going to speak, you want it to be worth your while as an audience. The last thing you do is say, I want to show up and be bored to death, or I want to be showed up and and worry about the fact that the presenter might pass out in front of us. You don't think about that. You're just thinking about, wow, like, I really hope that this topic is going to be great. So for me, that was a challenge that I said I wanted to be better, and I wanted to improve in my public presentation skills so that I could show up adequately for the audience. One of the things that really helped me was I do a lot of personal development reading. And there was, for some reason, a message that I felt was like the right timing that came in and said, when you're speaking in front of an audience, it's important that you remove, that light that you think is on you and put it back on the audience, because the audience is really eager to hear what you want to share. So if you just simply think about, I'm sharing what I have, my experiences for them, I'm not here for me, I'm here for them. It shifts your paradigm in a way in which the focus is no longer on you. The focus is now, what can I give them so that this is worth their while? That's it. Like, I want to share my experience, and you do with it what you'd like as an audience. But I don't want to show up thinking that, that I'm the highlight or something, because then that puts that attention on you, and you don't want that. The second thing on that for interpreting is really, it's really great piece of advice that I got early on in my career, which was, truly, when you show up, you're the professional there. No one else in that room as an interpreter is going to have the skills that you have. You've taken the training. You've developed your craft. You've created those skills and those techniques. You've worked on those. You're the professional there. So you go in there and you do your thing, knowing with assurance that you've prepared for this moment. Is it still going to give you butterflies? Heck yeah, it's still going to give you butterflies. You're still going to walk in there and like, I hope I'm prepared enough. But unless you haven't prepared at all, because if you haven't, then be nervous. But if you have prepared, then you can say, like, I've prepared as much as I can, and I trust in my abilities and I'm going to do a good job. And I think that sort of shifts your mentality, because it's a mind game. That was happening to me before I passed out. it's just, I was in my mind, I'm like, I don't belong here. You know, these people are like, so they're great speakers, yada, yada. It was all my head. Nobody was telling me that but myself. So definitely a mind game.
Thank you. Any
Don't
other
tell anyone I
questions?
almost passed out.
Sophia has a question.
Do you think confidence plays an essential part in either public speaking or like for promoting your personal brand? If so, how do you have like any tip to like promote or elevate that confidence?
Vera, you have such great questions. Yes, confidence plays a big role, but I don't think that you have to have the confidence initially in order to show up. I think the confidence develops because you show up. Does that make sense? So because you're showing up time and time again, in spite of maybe being nervous or maybe having that fear, the confidence it's like a muscle. You begin to form that confidence, but the only way to form that confidence is by showing up. So even if you have the skill sets, that's why many of us, when we start in our professions, we walk in like little mouse, like mice. We're shy. You know, we feel that people are going to judge our technique, when in actuality, they might be looking at us like, wow, like they're doing really great, or wow, I wish I had that ability. And we're over here thinking like I'm so nervous about, you know, maybe I'm doing this wrong. So yes, confidence plays a role, but confidence doesn't have to exist in order for you to be able to take action. I think that confidence is developed over time, and the only way you can develop it is by showing up.
Thank you. Sebastian has a question as well.
Yes, when presenting yourself or your brand, do you think it's well, you said it's important to be like very specific, like what you want to be known for, but do you think that you also have to be like broad, like very go into a lot of details about you, but in general, or to be very specific about
I think
something?
that's a great question, Sebastian. I think that for yourself, you can be very specific, only because it's like a destination marker for you. You want to know where you're heading. If you're broad about where you want to go to, or what you want to be known for, then that makes it very unclear for yourself. And when you're unclear as to what I want to be known for, you don't get to really choose those specific things that you want to focus on, because you're sort of all over the place, right? But if you're very clear for yourself in the beginning, just for you, even if it's written down somewhere, it's just like, one day I want to be a I want to specialize in neurology, but you're not quite there yet. You're not going to go out there and tell people, well, my name is Sebastian and I'm a Spanish interpreter that specializes in neurology. And then they're like, awesome, I need a neurologist interpreter, you know, have you come in? And then you're like, en la torre, now how am I supposed to, all this, you know, terminology that I don't have. So in the beginning, you may not necessarily want to share that. You may be general. Maybe you want to specialize or be specific to the general public in a different way. But for you, being very specific is important. It's almost like, and this is a different topic, I get it, but it's almost like niches. Do we know what niches are? So some people say, well, if you niche down, you'll get no business because you're so specific in what you want. Isn't it better to generalize? And the answer is both. You can generalize, but you can also niche down and specialize. So I would say definitely for yourself, be very specific in the beginning. You can be general with the public, but as you become clear and get more experience in your particular skill sets, then you're able to get more specific even with the general public.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions.
Do we have more questions? I think those were all of the questions.
Great. Well, I really appreciate your time, everyone. I am actually on social media as well. So if you're ever interested in, following any of my social media accounts, please feel free to do so. Guess what? I'm on LinkedIn. So if you show up on LinkedIn and, you want to look for me there, please feel free to send that connection.
Thank you very much. I'm just speechless because I really, really loved this conversation that you share with us, and all the tips and tricks, and your expertise is going to be very useful for the class. So once again, thank you for accepting the invitation, and I'm sure that you'll have new followers from Costa Rica.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to take some time away from your class to present. I really appreciate it and enjoyed. Thank you for your questions as well. Thank you, Maria Jose, for the invitation. We'll be in touch.